My name is Salina Almanzar. My preferred pronouns are she, her. I identify as Puerto Rican and Dominican. Please do not call me Hispanic or Spanish. I'm not from Spain. And my family is from New York by way of Puerto Rico and the Dominican Republic. And I speak English and Spanglish, not very good Spanish, but I'm working on it. This is what looking bilingüe means to me.
How did the reality that you and your siblings were going to look bilingual impact your parents' decisions? And can you give me examples of what those decisions were?
That's a great question. So for my parents, particularly my mom, she grew up speaking Spanish as her first language and really struggled even reading and writing in Spanish, which impacted reading and writing in English. And one of the things that she had shared with me growing up was that she purposely named myself and my siblings names that she felt like were racially or ethnically ambiguous. So we wouldn't go through the same things that she went to. But for her, she really felt like if I give them an ambiguous name, that's a leg up. I think the irony for my name is that it is a very Chicana name, spelled differently. So I still get something. Like there's no way that just a name would protect me from experiencing any sort of discrimination or getting the like where were you question, but it's something that impacted their decision.
Do you feel like you had a leg up in any case, or was there any situation in which you were like, oh wow, that actually worked out the way that she thought it would?
Yes and no. I think there are moments where like because it's not obvious that I'm Latina, or I walk into a room and people are like, you're not white, you're something, and then my name confirms that, it opens up a conversation that I think as a kid I was like excited about because I'm like, you think I'm interesting. And as like an introverted shy kid, it was like a conversation starter. But I mean, now I'm a little bit tired of it, to be honest. But I do think like there is something about like that ambiguity that I think like we've seen it documented for anybody that's light skinned or anybody that has like a racial some kind of racial ambiguity. There are benefits. It is a privilege for sure. Maybe teaching them English and mastery in English first, and then they can decide if they want to learn Spanish, for her felt more empowering. She initially was like, oh, maybe we'll just mix it in and it'll just be part of our how we talk to our kids. They'll learn Spanish and English at the same time. But there's always been an ambivalence there because of how much she struggled academically. And she's such a smart person, but it's just that the inadequacies in her school where she grew up didn't, and not having a good ESL program or a consistent ESL program, or realizing that ESL doesn't end after like second or third grade, like it can continue.
Yeah.
And I like we talk openly about that choice now because I think this happens, like you see this generation to generation where like the person that struggled really hard is like, I'm going to make sure they never have to struggle. And then ultimately there's like a loss of culture or a loss of language that happens. And then the next generation either is like, yeah, whatever, or I need to get my culture back. And I'm that one.
Yes, I love this story. Share, love this story. Share with us that amazing story that proves just how much kids are sponges when it comes to language in context.
I think this is one of those like moments where I realized that I knew a language that I didn't even realize I knew. I must have been like 6 or 7. My parents would speak in Spanish to each other or to like my grandmother or to my older family members. So I know I was around it all the time. I knew my parents would also negotiate my punishments or like surprises, mostly punishments though in Spanish. And I know I was running with my cousin in my grandmother's apartment in a hallway, and she lived in like a really one of those apartment buildings that's like 20 something floors in the Bronx. And it's split by a terrace. And our rule was you're only allowed to run to the edge of the hallway before you get to the terrace, because that's where the elevators are. And my mom was like, you're going to get snatched up. Somebody's going to throw you in the incinerator. Like, don't run past that wall. So I decided for some reason they were having a party and all the kids were playing in the hallway. And me and my cousins were like, we'll just run to the other hallway. So we ran the full length of the building back and forth and thought nobody saw us. I went home, thought everything was fine, and then realized that my parents were speaking Spanish to each other a lot. I was like, I think they're negotiating a punishment, and I think they know. So I just remember like really intently listening, sitting in the living room once we got home, and I heard my mom describe in Spanish to my dad that she was going to tell me to get up and go get something in the kitchen, which meant I had to cross through this hallway. And that when she did that, he was going to hide in the hallway. When I come back, he was going to snatch me. And it would be like a lesson for me to be like, see, and that's why you don't. And I understood everything. And as soon as she said, and then you're going to snatch her, I was like, no, and started crying. I was like, please don't, please don't, please don't. I just remember my parents looking at me like, what? And they were like, did you understand what we just said? And I was like, yeah, I'm really sorry. And started apologizing. And that was enough. Like, I didn't get punished after that.
Oh my God. Oh my God. I love that. I love that. I love that. That's so funny. And, you know, people don't, it's a weird mix because kids don't, you can't say kids learn by osmosis because it's not enough just to do that. Like you also have to be purposeful with the way that you teach. Right. But there are some ways that they can pick up, and there are some things that people probably do, parents probably do, and they don't realize that they're actually encouraging the teaching of this language.
It's funny too, because I remember the feeling of like understanding everything they're saying and being extremely conscious that also this is not English. And I still have that today. Like I can fully understand a conversation or like watch a movie, but if you ask me to repeat it, it takes a long time.
That's it, and that's the disconnect because you know, when I talk about biliteracy and dual language learning, I say you have to ask the kids questions. Mm-hmm. And you have to say, oh, what did the bear do? You know, the kid's story. What did the bear do? How did he feel? You know, but you're asking that in the target language, whatever that is. You're getting the kids to like reproduce the language and to like that comprehension to just kind of like grow and grow and expand. Share with us how your move from New York to Lancaster impacted your Latinidad.
Was pretty similar, at least in elementary school, because I grew up in the Bronx, predominantly Black and Latino neighborhoods. My school was very diverse. Moving to Lancaster, we moved to a predominantly Black and Latino neighborhood. There's predominantly Puerto Ricans in Lancaster City. And then I went to a school that was predominantly Black and Latino. So all of those things felt very familiar. But then going into middle school and high school is when I started to realize like, oh, this is different. Because my high school was like surrounded by farms, predominantly white. And there was only one other Puerto Rican girl in my grade. And they would get us confused all the time.
And how did that transition resonate in your work now?
Moving at such a formative age, I always feel like the new girl. Like I think that also informed my Latinidad because I had started to like not realize that I was Latinx, but like yes, that as a teenager and like starting to realize like, oh, that's why I might feel some of that. Especially going to a white school. So in the work that I make now, I think I was afraid to think about it for a long time. And now I'm actually interested in complicating it and interrogating that in my visual artwork and my writing. And the phrase that is like really close to my heart is ni de aquí ni de allá. There's like this great essay that I believe it's by Bell Hooks on marginality that I discovered like after college that really just made everything click to me. And it's like about the power of actually not abiding in one specific identity comfortably. Because then you can actually see the edges of things and where there's justices and injustices. And I think like with Lancaster as a place and as a culture, there's definitely like folks here that can trace their lineage back in Dutch history like really far, and there's pride in that, and it's amazing, it's beautiful, but it can make other people that have like a more recent history of coming here and setting down roots feel very out of place. And I think going to a Mennonite school with a lot of Mennonites that were like, my grandfather founded this place, it was so jarring for me that I think that's when I started to think like, what does it actually mean to be like a new American, if that makes any sense, even though I'm like second or third generation here. And it's like, okay, you got 14 generations on me in this place. What?
No, I'm so glad you say that. I went to the doctor. She was saying, she's like, aren't you jealous that they've got cemeteries where they can go visit their great, 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 great. And we just started laughing. And I'm like, oh yeah, in the 1700s. I'm like, I can't even conceive that. And I'm
Yeah.
kind of jealous about that.
Yeah.
Because, you get like two and a half generations from me, and suddenly everybody's like around the world.
Exactly. I've been having fun with like using that imagery because I also like got Ancestry and started backtracking and trying to do genealogy, which like I feel like with any Latino family reveals some secrets that some people you'll hit a wall or you'll ask the wrong question and then your tias are like, I'm like, oh no. So that's been interesting, but I've been sort of documenting it in my artwork because I feel like for a long time, just being the only Puerto Rican in my school, not the only Puerto Rican, but the only person that I could identify with in my high school, and not feeling like I could talk to a lot of people about it. And we had these genealogy assignments, and I remember like trying really hard to ask my mom, and then having her translate with my grandmother on the phone. But the interesting thing with Ancestry is if you get to 1898, especially for Puerto Rico, you have to get an international account. So you have to pay an additional fee because technically all those records are owned by Spain. So it's I guess, yeah, an odd way to confront colonialism. And it's like the impact that it has even now that I'm like, we don't even own our own records. What is this? I'm like, I might do it again. I'm trying to find like a grant or a fellowship as an excuse. So any rich people out there.
Has your family changed their tune about being bilingual or embracing their Latinidad? And I'm referencing the whole when you guys were being born, them choosing different names that wouldn't reflect that and not teaching you Spanish.
I've been able to have a lot of conversations with especially my mom and my dad. And I remember like she shared with me that it was when she was growing up, her family would go to Puerto Rico, and there was like a big sort of like to do about we're going because we have time and we need to go and we have to go to La Isla. And she never really understood it because when she would go to Puerto Rico, she didn't feel an attachment to it. And then she was like, and I watch you and you have like this huge longing to go to this place that I just don't quite understand why it's there. But I'm like, did I mess up? And I'm like, no, you didn't mess up. I just really want to go and want to like understand what that means. So for her, like, I think that she's in that generation that had to fight so hard to prove that she was American. That has influenced every decision she's made after that. So she wanted us to feel so American. And I get it. I totally understand why you made the choices that you did. I'm encountering more moments where I am approached on the street and folks speak to me in Spanish first. And there's no question. And I'm like, yes, I'm one of you. I don't feel as insecure not knowing everything and not knowing it perfectly. But I remember walking down the street and this dude's like walking towards me, asked me in Spanish if I spoke Spanish. And I was like, a little bit. And he was like, I could tell it's in your blood. And I was like, whew. And I just thought that was such a beautiful moment to feel seen.